Alright everyone, Buzzfeed has a penchant for clickbait and sensationalism. I mean, that's basically how media organizations in the old sense, the legacy media, it's the only way that they can make money. Because they've got the big studios and, you know, the silver-lined bathtub, sort of golden-crusted feet bullshit that goes on in the penthouses in Manhattan. So they really have no choice. And some of them, like Salon, they have to keep downsizing because they can't make ends meet because nobody wants to listen to their stupidity. But racist Buzzfeed decided to come out and make an article. And I've got it open because I need to go through it, and some of these things are kind of funny. 37 things white people need to stop ruining in 2018. Now, the author of this obviously is an alt-leftist named Patrice Peck, I guess, or something. Patricia Peck, maybe that's a typo. But we'll go through these, and we'll ruminate on all the things that those evil white people have ruined. You know, people like myself, we ruin all these things. Number one is macaroni and cheese. I'm not sure how that's been ruined, since I've never seen two identical recipes. Like, regardless of race, like, if you make macaroni and cheese, it's not going to be the same as the way that your mom makes it, the way your friend makes it, or something. Like, you know, my mom, her mac and cheese, it's got a white kind of sharp cheddar. It's more on the dry side. It's quite cheesy. The one time I think I made it, it was more on the slightly orange. It was a little bit more mild and a little bit more cheesy. And I smear it with ketchup. I know some people find that absolutely hideous. Number two is protests. I guess, you know, if you're white, you're not allowed to protest, I guess, or something like that. Number three, K-pop. And there was a band, actually, a K-pop band made up entirely of North Koreans is the link here. So I guess it's like, the idea is that you shouldn't be making K-pop unless you're actually, like, Korean. Now, let alone that the author of this article, side by side, she would not be able to tell a Korean from someone from Japan. And that would be considered extremely disrespectful if you were actually in Korea or Japan and made that mistake. It's like you get these, I don't know, it's just total weirdness. Sneaker culture, which I didn't know sneaker culture was a thing. You mean like Air Jordans or something? I don't even know. It makes no sense to me. Makeup. Oh yeah, the idea that white people, if they use like bronzer or something, they're trying to look black, I guess, you know, something like that. Trees. How do you gentrify trees? That's where birds live. Wealthy residents have fitted trees with anti-bird spikes in a bid to protect their expensive cars from bird droppings. Well, you see, I wouldn't call that gentrification. I would call that rich people sometimes do strange things. And if there happens to be a black PhD living in that neighborhood, you can be assured they probably put those up too, you know, for exactly the same reason. Oh, what a great idea. Well, it's not a great idea, but it has nothing to do with the fact that the people doing it are white. The United States of America. 70% of voters were white and the majority voted for Trump, those evil racists. Yeah, and the list goes on. So basically, it's, you know, white people are responsible for all of the ills of the world. And the funny thing is, like, if something like this were satirical, it'd be like, you know, who cares? But they actually, some of these people actually believe this. They take it quite literally and they ruminate on it constantly. Meanwhile, if you voted for Trump, or if you called yourself, you know, right-wing, or you said, well, you know, I don't feel guilty, there's no such thing as white privilege, or I don't feel guilty for being white or something, that makes you a total Nazi bigot. But somebody can write an article in a supposedly journalistic site. Now, of course, BuzzFeed's idea of journalism is not maybe the journalism of sane individuals, but they claim to be like journalistic, they have integrity, you know, it's news, it's, you know, opinion, in some cases analysis. You can write an article about a bunch of reasons why a whole race of people is so bad and they ruin things, and there's, you know, smelly, dumb, white scum, basically. And can you imagine, like, if a site, any site, were to write an article that were basically an inversion of this, if we were talking about black people or Hispanics or something, immediately a bunch of internet vigilantes would show up. And they would pressure their web hoster to get rid of their site. They would pressure all of the other, like, sites to stop serving ads to them. And they would get crushed underfoot. But somehow BuzzFeed manages to escape that, and I can tell you why. It's because there's no real outrage about it. Only a small group of people understand that this is the moral and ethical equivalent of exactly its inverse. which would be considered heinously racist. It's exactly the same thing, but if you point that out, somehow that makes you racist too. Simply noticing this problem, the fact that it is bigoted, makes you, for some reason, in many people's minds, yourself a bigot. It's funny how that works. Because remember, you're not allowed to have an opinion. If you're white female and you're like maybe a lesbian or something, you can have some opinions, but if you've still got white skin, so you're a second-class citizen. Basically, what's happening in some of these cases is basically if you're white, you're being told to sit on the back of the bus. I hate to use that example, but it does seem like that's what is happening. You're expected to sit down and shut up and not say anything when you see a problem. Well, I certainly see a problem. I see a problem with. The legacy media has learned that they can make a lot of money off an article like this. And it's not just because they're trying to play up to the left, by the way. In part, it's also because they're trying to antagonize people who oppose that ideology. And they know that the average person who's white realizes that that's bigoted. Whether they're willing to say it in public or not because they don't want to, they don't want to debate it. Reverse racism doesn't exist, whatever. Their friends won't accept the argument. Those, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist, or you must be a Nazi because you don't like Buzzfeed. Most of them will be upset at the fact that something like that is published by a mainstream, supposedly journalistic outlet. Personally, I think that if an outlet is going to call itself Real News, Journalism, This is the Truth, and has a fucking White House correspondent and stuff, they should be held to a higher standard than someone who's simply making a blog or has an independent site with 10 followers. But we actually, for some reason, we do the reverse. And it doesn't really make sense. It doesn't even make sense in an economic manner. Because those inefficient old companies would fall by the wayside 10 times faster and be replaced by much more efficient information production. If it weren't for them being sheltered, essentially, by so many people within culture. But, I mean, make no mistake, this individual who wrote this is a racist. She is a racist. This article is bigoted in nature. Now, do I think that it should be banned? Absolutely not. No, go ahead. But let's call it what it is and not browbeat people for noticing the fact that, yeah, it's bigoted to blame an entire race of people for ruining a bunch of things. Most of this is totally subjective. Oh, they ruined the United States. 70% of whites voted for Trump. Well, I'm sorry that you feel sour grapes over Hillary Clinton losing. But if you want to find someone who actually said something marginally bigoted towards black people, it's not Donald Trump, it was Hillary Clinton with her hot sauce reference. Which a lot of these people, because they're in an echo chamber, they don't even know that it happened. All they have to do is Google it. They'll see her for exactly what she is, but they think that the D after her name makes her like, she can't be bigoted because she's a Democrat. Okay, she can't be bigoted because she calls herself a liberal, which she's not. She's a neoliberal. She's just a corporate shill. So, get your hate speech off this Buzzfeed. It should, start gyrating around. That's what we should be doing. I'm just joking there. No, the proper thing to do is just refute it in a calm manner. Now, of course, that'll enrage some people. It'll be like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. White privilege is absolutely real. You can't be racist if you're not white because, power, privilege, what some postmodernist newspeak insert here by some college professor who didn't even study anything worth studying. Okay, that's like your opinion, but the proof is in the pudding. Again, I think that a while ago, didn't somebody make a filter that you could, run a news article through it, and anytime the word white appeared, it would replace it with black? And then they were posting examples of this, on Twitter, and it was just you could tell. In a perfect inversion situation, it would have raised so much ire. It would have raised so many claims of racism that mainstream publications would have been knocked offline by vigilantes. Absolutely. Absolutely would have caused them to be deplatformed. But nobody, ever did that because, of course, the ire that they had, the bigotry that they had was directed at supposedly the hegemon of culture. Even though in the same breath they'll say, but white people didn't build this culture, like the U.S. was built by slaves, basically. Everything was built, in the 1800s by people who were enslaved. White people didn't do jack shit. All these inventions, they're Islamic or they're from some other group. Well, then why are you blaming me? My family's from Vermont. We never had slavery. We never had segregation either. We couldn't have benefited from it because we outlawed it before we were part of the U.S. Nobody up here wanted slaves. It wasn't, we were small family farmers, not plantation owners in Vermont. It's a pretty good way to live, too, other than the winter. I can only imagine, by the way, as an aside, a winter like this where it's like, routinely 20, 25 below. How the fuck do you survive even if you have plenty of wood to burn in the fire? It doesn't make any sense. You must have had like 10 woolen blankets. Where'd you get the wool? I think for a while there, it was before we even had like a textile mill in this state. They had to import it all. Would have been misery, especially if you're on the ocean too. Maybe it's a little bit warmer, but then you get that stiff, wet breeze on you with all the brine and salt spray. It must have been pure misery for those people. How did you even justify believing in an all-loving God, like the New England sort of Puritan tradition? How did they even justify it after a couple of winters? They're like, oh my God, basically Satan must have taken hold. It just doesn't make sense. That's about all. Peace out.